The car almost missed her. In the bright, unforgiving light of late morning, she stumbled out from between two stalled trucks on the roadside, her dress torn at the shoulder, her hair loose and wind-tangled, one hand pressed to her ribs as if holding herself together. The single dad driving past had already begun to slow for traffic when he saw her face, not the fear alone but the quiet desperation that looked like it had been carried for years and finally spilled over. He braked hard, heart pounding, knowing in that instant that whatever this was, it was a turning point for both of them. Before the story unfolds any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one is watching, take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Journal. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are still searching. The man behind the wheel was named Elias Rowe, a widowed father of one who had learned to measure his days in school drop-offs, grocery receipts, and the fragile balance between exhaustion and love. It was late morning, the sun high and warm, casting clean shadows across the highway as he drove back from a construction job that barely paid enough but kept the lights on. His daughter, Mira, was at school, and his thoughts had been on whether he could afford new shoes for her before winter. When he pulled over and opened the passenger door, he did not think of himself as brave or heroic. He thought of how he would want someone to stop if Mira ever stood alone like that, trembling in daylight with nowhere to go. The woman climbed in, shaking, the fabric of her dress torn as if she had ripped it herself to escape. She smelled of expensive perfume and dust, a strange mix of wealth and fear. Elias handed her a bottle of water from the cup holder, noticing how her hands trembled as she drank. The road behind them hummed with passing cars, indifferent to the small rescue happening in plain sight. He did not ask questions right away. He simply drove, letting the steady movement of the car and the clear blue sky above begin to settle her breathing. Her name was Seraphine Vale, though she would only reveal it later, after miles had passed and the city skyline rose in the distance. She had been married that morning, the ceremony staged like a corporate acquisition disguised as love. The billionaire groom, Aldrich Huxley, was a man whose name filled magazines and boardrooms, a man who collected power the way others collected memories. The marriage had been arranged to seal a business empire, and Seraphine had been the final signature on a deal she never agreed with. When she realized that the vows were not symbolic but contractual, binding her freedom as tightly as any legal document, something inside her broke. In the middle of the reception preparations, in full daylight with guests arriving, she ran. Elias listened as she spoke in halting fragments, his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. He did not interrupt or judge. He only felt the weight of another human being trusting him with her story. He thought of his own life unraveling years earlier when his wife had died suddenly, leaving him with grief and a newborn and a future he had not planned. He understood what it meant to wake up one day and realize the life laid out for you was not the one you could survive. They drove through sunlit streets lined with trees and corner cafes, the normalcy of daytime life contrasting sharply with the chaos Seraphine carried inside. Elias suggested a small diner near the river, a place with big windows and cheap coffee where no one asked questions. Inside, the light spilled across worn tables and chipped mugs, and for the first time since she ran, Seraphine sat without looking over her shoulder. Elias bought her a sandwich and watched as she ate slowly, as if relearning something simple and human. As the hours passed, the reality of her situation settled in. She had no phone, no wallet, and nowhere safe to go. The billionaire marriage she escaped from was not something she could simply disappear from. Elias knew the risks the moment she explained who she was married to. He knew that helping her might invite trouble into his already fragile life. Yet every instinct told him that turning away now would be a betrayal not just of her, but of the man he wanted his daughter to grow up believing he was. He offered her the spare room in his small house on the edge of town, just for a night, just until she could think clearly. The afternoon sun followed them home, illuminating cracked sidewalks, children playing in sprinklers, and a world that continued on despite private storms. When Mira returned from school and met Seraphine, there was a cautious curiosity that softened quickly into warmth. Children, Elias thought, often recognize brokenness without fear. Over the next days, daylight brought both comfort and tension. News reports quietly mentioned the high-profile wedding that had been postponed due to an unexpected incident. Elias felt the pressure building like heat before a storm. Seraphine spent hours sitting by the window, watching sunlight move across the floor, grappling with guilt, fear, and a growing sense of relief she had not allowed herself to feel before. Elias returned to work each morning, carrying the secret with him, wondering how long kindness could outrun power. The turning point came on a clear morning when a sleek black car appeared at the end of the street. Elias saw it from the porch as he drank his coffee, the sun just beginning to warm the air. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest that came with impending loss. But what followed was not a confrontation, not the crushing force of wealth reclaiming its possession. It was a lawyer, not for Aldrich Huxley, but for Seraphine herself. In running, she had unknowingly triggered a clause in the marriage contract that voided the agreement if she left before final documentation. The billionaire marriage, for all its power, had been built on a flaw. Seraphine stood in the doorway, sunlight framing her, as the truth settled in. She was free. Not because of money or influence, but because she had chosen herself and someone else had chosen to help her without asking for anything in return. Elias watched her cry, not in despair but in release, and felt something heal inside him too. He realized that his life, though small and strained, had held enough space for a moment that mattered. Days later, in full daylight, Seraphine packed a single bag. She had decided to leave the city, to start again somewhere no one knew her name. Before she left, she knelt in front of Mira, thanking her for the kindness only a child could offer so freely. She hugged Elias, a long, wordless embrace that carried gratitude, respect, and the understanding that some connections are meant to be brief but permanent in their impact. As her bus pulled away under the bright afternoon sun, Elias stood with his daughter, feeling the strange mix of sadness and pride that comes with doing the right thing. Life did not suddenly become easier. Bills still waited. Work was still hard. But something had shifted. He had been reminded that even ordinary people, living ordinary lives, could change the direction of someone else's story simply by stopping. Years later, Elias would hear Seraphine's name again, not in scandal but in quiet admiration. She had founded a non-profit supporting people trapped in coercive arrangements, using her experience to light paths for others. A handwritten letter arrived one day, thanking him again, reminding him that the lift he gave her in daylight had carried her out of darkness. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can ripple far beyond a single moment, please take a second now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and let us know in the comments how it made you feel. Special request: comment the word kindness below if you believe small acts can change lives. In the end, Elias returned to his routines, to school mornings and quiet evenings, but with a deeper sense of purpose. He knew now that second chances were not rare miracles reserved for the powerful. They were choices made in daylight by people willing to stop, open a door, and care.